The room went quiet in a way that did not feel respectful. Plates paused halfway to tables. A phone lifted, then another. The man stood still with a tray in his hands while a woman across the room spoke his name like it tasted bad. She said he had spilled the wine. She said he had ruined her dress. She said he should be fired. He did not argue. He looked at the floor, then at the manager, and nodded once. There was a child waiting at home who needed groceries and a school form signed by morning. What the woman did not know was that the lie she told would protect her. What the man knew was that correcting her would cost him more than he could afford. If you're drawn to quiet stories that sit with hard choices, stay with this one. The restaurant was loud in a careful way. Cutlery tapped plates. Glasses met the table with small, deliberate sounds. The man moved between tables with a tray balanced on one hand, his other hand free to steady chairs or shift the place setting back into line. He had learned how to move without drawing attention. It was easier that way. The woman stood near the center of the room. She had not been standing a moment earlier. When she rose, the movement was sharp enough to cut through the noise. Her chair scraped the floor. A few heads turned before she spoke. She said his name wrong the first time. She corrected herself and said it again, louder. He stopped walking. The tray tilted slightly, then steadied. A glass rattled but did not spill. He waited. Waiting was part of the job. She said he had spilled red wine on her dress. She said it like a fact that did not need checking. She held the fabric away from her body, 2 fingers pinching the stain she had made herself earlier. In the narrow space between the tables where no one else had been, she said the word ruined and let it hang. Someone near the window lifted a phone. Someone else whispered. The manager looked up from the bar with a face already set into something apologetic. The man did not speak. He lowered the tray to the nearest empty table. He placed it down carefully, making sure nothing slid. Then he folded his hands in front of him and waited for the next instruction. The woman looked at him as if waiting for resistance. When it did not come, her voice tightened. She said he should be fired. She said she knew the owner. She said she would not return if this was how things were handled. The manager came closer. He did not ask what happened. He did not ask anyone else. He asked the man to step aside. The request was soft, but it was not optional. As the man followed him, he felt the room watching his back. He kept his shoulders level. He did not hurry. He did not slow down. His shoes made the same sound on the floor they always did. Near the service station, the manager spoke quietly. He said mistakes like this could not happen. He said the woman was important. He said there were forms that would need to be filled out later. He said for now, it would be better if the man clocked out. The man nodded once. He reached up and untied his apron. The knot caught for a second. He worked it loose with his thumb. He folded the apron instead of dropping it. He placed it on the counter where it would be found. The woman was still standing when he looked back toward the room. She was speaking to someone on her phone now, her voice lower, more controlled. The stain on her dress had already darkened. It would likely come out. He thought of the envelope on his kitchen counter with the school logo in the corner. He thought of the refrigerator that hummed too loudly at night. He thought of the list on his phone that told him what could be skipped this week and what could not. If he spoke now, the room would shift. The phone cameras would tilt. Someone would ask questions. The woman's face would change. The manager would stiffen. The story would no longer belong to her alone. If he spoke now, she would deny it. If he insisted, she would be embarrassed. Embarrassment would turn into anger. Anger would look for somewhere to land. He did not speak. He walked toward the back door. The air changed as he passed through the kitchen. Heat pressed against his face. Someone called his name, not the woman this time, but a cook who had worked beside him for years. The man raised a hand without turning around. Outside, the night was cooler than he expected. The alley smelled like old cardboard and detergent from the laundromat next door. He stood for a moment with his hand on the door, feeling the vibration of the music through the metal. From inside, the restaurant continued. Orders were taken. Plates were cleared. The woman would sit back down soon. The space he had occupied would be filled. He checked the time on his phone. He did the math without moving his lips. Then he put the phone away and started walking. He did not look back. Morning came without ceremony. The man woke before his alarm, the way he usually did, and lay still until he heard the refrigerator cycle off in the kitchen. The apartment was quiet except for that and the soft breathing from the other room. He stood and pulled on the same jeans he had folded over the chair the night before. In the bathroom, he ran the tap just enough to wet his hands and smooth his hair. The mirror showed nothing unusual. That felt important. In the kitchen, he opened the fridge and took inventory without writing anything down. Milk was low but not empty. Bread had 3 slices left. He reached for the jar of peanut butter and turned it upside down to see how much clung to the bottom. Enough for 1 lunch, maybe 2 if he spread it thin. He set a pan on the stove and cracked 2 eggs, 1 for himself, 1 for his child. He added salt by feel. While they cooked, he signed the permission slip that had been left on the counter, his name careful but fast. The ink bled slightly where he pressed too hard. The bedroom door opened. His child shuffled in, hair flattened on one side, sock half off. The man slid a plate across the table and nudged the sock with his foot until it was back where it belonged. "Morning," he said. "Morning," the child said, then yawned. They sat without talking while they ate. The child swung their legs under the chair, heel tapping wood in a steady rhythm. When the plate was empty, the child looked up. "You're tired." The man rinsed the pan before answering. "Busy night," he said. The water ran too hot. He adjusted it and kept rinsing until the pan was clean. The child accepted this and went back to chewing the last bite of toast. They did not ask what kind of busy. They had learned the difference between questions that got answers and questions that stayed in the air. The man packed the lunch while the child put on shoes. He wrapped the sandwich in paper, pressed it flat, and slipped it into the bag with an apple that had one soft spot. He turned toward the bottom. He zipped the bag closed and handed it over. At the door, he knelt to tighten a loose lace. His fingers moved automatically. The child stood still, looking down at the top of his head. "You coming early today?" the child asked. He paused, then shook his head. "Not today." The child nodded. This answer meant something, but not enough to press. They opened the door and stepped into the hall. After the door closed, the man stayed where he was for a moment. Then he stood and looked around the apartment. The quiet felt heavier now. He gathered the dishes and washed them, though there were only 2. He wiped the table, even though it was already clean. When he checked his phone, there was a message from the restaurant. His shift had been moved to later in the week. No explanation, just an update to the schedule. He set the phone face down. Outside, the city moved at its usual pace. He walked a long way to the bus stop, past the corner store with the flickering sign and the empty lot where weeds grew through broken concrete. He passed a restaurant he had never worked at and a diner he once had. The memory came and went without stopping. On the bus, he stood holding the pole, letting others take the seats. He watched the streets slide past the window. His reflection appeared and disappeared with the light. At the restaurant, the back door opened to the same kitchen, the same heat. Someone nodded to him. Someone else avoided his eyes. His station had been changed. He was assigned fewer tables closer to the wall. The manager spoke to him without raising his voice, pointing to where he should stand when he should break. He listened. He nodded. He did not explain. The woman arrived just after noon. He saw her before she saw him. She walked in with 2 others, her posture relaxed, her voice controlled. She did not look toward his section. When she passed him, her eyes moved past his face as if it were part of the wall. He stepped back to give her room. His foot caught briefly on the edge of the mat. He corrected without looking down. All afternoon, he worked around the shape of her presence. He refilled water glasses. He cleared plates. He moved when told and stayed still when waiting. Each action fit into the next without pause. When his shift ended, he checked the schedule again. The gaps were clearer now. He folded his apron and hung it where it belonged. As he walked out, he felt the weight of the day settle into his shoulders. Not exhaustion, something steadier. He thought of the question his child had not asked. He thought of the answer he had already given. He kept walking. The woman's mornings did not begin quietly. They began with movement and voices and decisions made before coffee cooled. She sat at a table that was never empty. Even when she was alone, a phone rested near her hand. Another waited in her bag. Names moved across the screen in short lines, each one attached to an expectation. The incident at the restaurant had already been reduced to a detail. Someone had handled it. Someone always did. A note had been made, a complaint acknowledged, an assurance given. Her schedule did not change. No meeting paused for it. She wore a different dress now. The red one was gone, taken by a cleaner who knew how to remove stains without questions. The replacement fit better. She did not think about the man when she put it on. At the restaurant, the man stood where he had been told to stand. The new position kept him close to the wall, away from the center of the room. From there, he could see most of the floor without being seen himself. He learned quickly how to serve from the edges. The manager checked on him more often than necessary. Not with concern, but with attention. Mistakes were corrected before they were made. Instructions were repeated. The man accepted this without comment. He adjusted his pace. He adjusted his hands. When tips were counted, his pile was smaller. He noticed without counting twice. He slid the bills into his pocket and moved on. The woman returned often that week, sometimes with company, sometimes alone. She favored the same table near the window. Light caught her face there in a way that made others look longer than they meant to. When she spoke to the staff, her voice was calm, polite. She thanked them by name as she knew it. She did not know his. Once, as he passed behind her chair, she shifted without looking, her arm brushing his sleeve. The contact was brief. She stiffened, then relaxed when nothing followed. He continued walking. Later, the manager pulled him aside. He said there had been feedback. He said certain guests preferred not to be reminded of unpleasant experiences. He said it would be best if the man avoided her section when possible. The man nodded. He did not ask what would happen if avoiding was not possible. In the kitchen, a cook slid a plate toward him and paused. "You good?" the cook asked. The man picked up the plate. "Yeah," he said. The cook watched him go, then shook his head slightly. Nothing more was said. At home, the man spread the week's cash on the table. He lined the bills by size, then folded them together. The total was lower than it should have been. He adjusted the list on his phone, crossing out 2 items and moving one to the next week. He did this without sighing. His child sat nearby, drawing. Crayons rolled off the table and onto the floor. The man picked them up one by one and placed them back in the box. "Can I have juice?" the child asked. He checked the fridge. The carton was nearly empty. He poured what was left into a cup, then filled the rest with water. He stirred with his finger until the color evened out. The child drank it without comment. Back at the restaurant, a form appeared with his name on it. A warning, written in careful language. The manager explained it in a voice meant to sound reasonable. It referenced the wine, the dress, the guest. It mentioned standards. The man read it once. He did not read it again. He signed where indicated. As he handed the pen back, he looked up briefly. The manager met his eyes, then looked away first. The woman did not see this. She was seated, laughing softly at something someone else had said. Her glass caught the light. This time, nothing spilled. The man returned to his place near the wall. The space there felt smaller than before. Not physically. In a way that had edges. He felt the shape of the role he was being given and understood how easily it could close. He stayed anyway. The form waited for him at the start of the shift. It lay flat on the counter near the register, aligned with the edge as if someone had taken time to place it just right. His name was printed at the top, spelled correctly this time. The manager did not speak at first. He stood beside the counter and watched the man read. The kitchen noise rose and fell behind them. A pan hit the stove too hard. Someone laughed. The form explained that the previous incident had been reviewed. It stated that while termination was not being pursued, a reduction in hours would take effect immediately. It cited guest satisfaction. It cited professionalism. It avoided blame by naming everything except the person responsible. At the bottom was a space for a signature. Below that, a date. The man held the paper with both hands. He felt the thinness of it, how easily it could tear. He imagined what it would sound like if he did. The manager cleared his throat. "You can contest it," he said, "if you want." The man looked up. The manager's eyes did not settle. They moved to the side, then back, as if searching for the right level of distance. "There be a review," the manager added. "It takes time." The man nodded. Time was something he measured carefully. He knew how much of it he could afford. He picked up the pen. The ink dragged slightly at first, then smoothed out. His signature came out smaller than usual. When he finished, he slid the paper back across the counter. The manager folded it once and placed it in a drawer. The drawer closed with a soft click. That sound stayed with the man longer than the words had. The rest of the shift moved slowly. Fewer tables meant longer stretches of standing. He wiped down surfaces that were already clean. He refilled sugar jars. He watched the door. Midway through the afternoon, the woman arrived earlier than usual. She was alone. Her phone was in her hand, her expression focused. She took her seat by the window without looking around. He noticed something immediately. Her bag was open, its contents visible where it rested against the chair. Papers spilled out, held together by a thin clip. One page had a letterhead he recognized. He had seen it on envelopes before. Legal. Formal. Not something meant to be seen by strangers. A man from another table leaned back too far in his chair. His elbow brushed the woman's bag. The clip loosened. Papers slid halfway out and hovered there, waiting. The man took a step forward without thinking. He adjusted the chair with his foot, just enough to steady it. He reached down and tucked the papers back into the bag, securing the clip. His hand moved quickly, practiced. "Careful," he said, to the other guest, not to her. The guest muttered an apology and leaned forward again. The woman looked up then. Their eyes met for a second. Something passed across her face. Not recognition, not gratitude. Awareness. She closed her bag and placed it on the floor. "Thank you," she said, her voice low. He nodded once and stepped back. He did not say anything else. She returned to her phone. The moment ended. Around them, the restaurant continued as if nothing had happened. But the man understood what he had prevented. Papers like that did not belong on the floor. They did not survive photographs or whispers. They did not disappear easily. Later, when he clocked out early because there were no tables left for him, he walked past the window where she sat. She did not look up. Her reflection hovered in the glass, steady and intact. Outside, the light had shifted. Evening was coming sooner now. He walked home instead of taking the bus, letting the distance stretch. At the apartment, he found a note from the school taped to the door, a reminder about a fee he had not paid yet. He peeled it off and folded it into his pocket. Inside, he sat at the table and opened his phone. He adjusted the list again. Another item moved to the next week. Another crossed out entirely. His child came in from the bedroom and set a book down in front of him. "Can you read this?" they asked. "In a minute," he said. He stared at the page without turning it. His signature from earlier replayed in his mind. The way the pen had hesitated. The way the drawer had closed. By staying silent, he had protected her twice now. Once publicly. Once without witnesses. The choice no longer felt temporary. It felt finished. The hours disappeared first. They did not vanish all at once. They thinned. A shift shortened by 30 minutes. A day removed from the schedule without comment. The man noticed each change as it came, adjusted, and kept going. He did not ask why. Asking would not add hours back. Mornings stretched longer. Afternoons opened up in ways that felt wrong. He filled them with errands he used to rush through. He waited in lines. He walked instead of taking the bus. He stood in the kitchen and checked the time more often than necessary. At the table, he counted coins. He stacked them by size, then slid them together. The sound was soft but precise. He wrote the total on a scrap of paper and compared it to the number on his phone. The gap between them was small but fixed. His child sat across from him, legs tucked under the chair, watching the coins move. The man finished counting and gathered them into his palm. He did not hide them. "You didn't do the bad thing," the child said. The words were simple. They were not framed as a question. The child did not look up when they said it. They pressed a crayon hard against the paper and drew a line that went off the page. The man closed his hand around the coins. He stood and carried them to the jar on the counter. He poured them in and twisted the lid tight. "I know," he said. That was all. Dinner was quieter after that. He cooked rice and vegetables. Meat stayed in the freezer. He stirred slowly, scraping the bottom of the pot to keep it from sticking. The child ate without complaint. Later, as he washed the dishes, he noticed a crack in one of the plates. It ran from the edge toward the center, thin and sharp. He set the plate aside instead of putting it back in the cabinet. At the restaurant, his presence became conditional. He was called in when it was busy. He was sent home when it was not. The manager's explanation stayed vague. The man accepted them without reacting. One afternoon, he arrived to find his name missing from the schedule entirely. The board had been erased and rewritten. There was no space left where his name had been. He stood in front of it longer than necessary. Then he took off his apron and folded it. He placed it on the hook anyway. In the dining room, the woman sat at her usual table. She looked unsettled for the first time, not distressed, off balance. She checked her phone, then set it face down. She looked around the room, then back at the door. Something had gone wrong elsewhere. The man could see it in the way her posture tightened, in the way she pressed her fingers together, as if holding something in place. A man at the next table leaned toward his companion and spoke too loudly. He said her name. He said it with a question in his voice. The woman stiffened. She turned slightly, her face angled away. The question hovered, unfinished. The man stepped forward before he was asked. He placed a glass of water on the table between the two men. The movement interrupted them. The moment shifted. "Can I get you anything else?" he asked. The men shook their heads. Their attention moved. The woman exhaled slowly and picked up her fork. She did not look at him this time. She did not thank him. Later, when he checked his phone, there was a message from the school. The fee had been extended by a week. He did the math again. It would still be close. At home, he packed lunches with what was left. He cut sandwiches in half to make them look fuller. He wiped the counter twice. His child watched him from the doorway. "Why don't you tell them?" the child asked, not looking at him directly. "Tell who?" he said. "The people," the child said. "That it wasn't you." The man paused. He set the knife down flat on the counter. "It's complicated," he said. The child nodded once, as if accepting a rule they did not like. They turned and went back to their room. That night, the man lay awake longer than usual. The refrigerator hummed. A car passed outside. He thought about the way the room had gone quiet that first night. How easily it had turned. Across the city, the woman sat alone at a long table. Papers were spread out in front of her now, stacked carefully, weighted at the corners. She read the same page twice without turning it. Something was wrong. Not with the papers themselves, but with how untouched they were. The lack of fallout did not match the risk. She thought of the man near the wall, of how he moved when he did not need to be seen. For the first time, the silence did not feel like protection. It felt unstable. The woman began with small checks, not confrontations, not questions that could be repeated. She asked for timelines that should have already been clear. She reread emails she had skimmed before. She noticed what was missing. At the restaurant, she arrived earlier than usual and stayed longer. She watched the staff move around her. She noticed who spoke when she entered and who did not. The room adjusted to her presence the way it always had. But something in the pattern felt altered. The man was not there. At first she assumed it was coincidence. Schedules changed. People rotated. She finished her meal and left without asking. The next time she came, she looked for him deliberately. She scanned the wall where he used to stand. She watched the door to the kitchen. She did not see him. She asked the manager, casually, as if it did not matter. "The waiter who usually works this section," she said. "Where is he?" The manager hesitated. "Just long enough." "He's not on today," he said. Then, after a pause, "He hasn't been on much." The answer stayed with her longer than it should have. On the drive home, she replayed it. Not the words, but the space between them. That evening, she spread the papers out again. The same ones the man had tucked back into her bag. She realized how close they had been to the floor, how easily someone could have seen the letterhead, How quickly the story could have shifted. She searched her memory for the moment itself. Not the accusation. The moment before it. The narrow space between the tables. The feeling of panic that had risen without warning. The decision she had made to redirect it. She had not checked whether the wine had actually spilled. The next day, she returned to the restaurant unannounced. She did not take her usual table. She sat near the service station, close enough to hear the kitchen. The man came out carrying a tray. He moved more slowly now, not tired, careful. He stopped to let others pass. He adjusted his grip when the weight shifted. His eyes stayed low unless he needed to look up. She watched him without being obvious. She noticed how often he was redirected, how often he was corrected for things that did not need correcting. She noticed the way the manager spoke to him with a smile that did not soften anything. When he passed her table, she looked directly at him. He met her eyes, nodded once, and kept going. There was no accusation in his face, no appeal, just acknowledgement. Later, she asked for the check. When it came, she did not look at the total. She folded the bill and left it on the table without opening it. As she stood to leave, she glanced back toward the wall. The space was empty. Outside, she stopped walking and stood still on the sidewalk. People moved around her, impatient. She did not move. She understood then that the man had not simply stayed quiet. He had absorbed something meant for her. More than once. The realization did not come with relief. It came with weight. She turned back toward the restaurant, then stopped. Acting too quickly would be easy. Repair would not be. Across the city, the man sat at his kitchen table with a stack of unopened mail. He opened one envelope and closed it again without reading. He slid it to the side. His child sat nearby doing homework. The man sharpened a pencil and set it down within reach. Neither of them spoke. The space between silence and recognition narrowed. It did not close. The woman did not come to the restaurant the next day, or the day after that. When she did return, it was during the slowest hour, when the light from the windows lay flat across the tables and the staff moved without urgency. She asked to speak to the manager before she sat down. They stood near the bar, close enough that others could hear if they tried. She did not lower her voice. She did not raise it either. She said there had been a mistake. She said she had blamed the wrong person. She said she wanted the record corrected. The manager nodded too quickly. He said, of course. He said these things happened. He said the situation had already been handled, but it could be revisited. She shook her head. Not quietly, she said. The word landed between them. The manager glanced toward the dining room, then back at her. The man was in the kitchen when the manager called his name. He wiped his hands on a towel before stepping out. The towel stayed in his hand. They all stood there together. The woman faced him fully this time. She said his name correctly. She said she had been wrong. She said she had accused him publicly and would correct it the same way. A few nearby tables went quiet. Someone set down a fork. Someone else pretended not to listen. The man stood still. He did not nod. He did not step back. He listened. The manager cleared his throat and said they would update the file. He said the warning would be removed. He said hours could be restored. The woman turned to the man. "I'm sorry," she said. The apology was direct. It did not explain itself. He looked at her, then at the manager. The towel in his hand was damp now. He folded it once. "I won't be staying," he said. The words came out evenly, not defiant, final. The manager blinked. "We can," he started. The man shook his head. "I've already adjusted," he said. The woman's expression shifted. Not surprise. Something closer to loss. She opened her mouth, then closed it. He untied his apron. This time the knot came loose easily. He placed it on the counter instead of hanging it up. "I needed the job," he said. "Not to explain, but to place the truth where it belonged. I still do." The manager said his name again, softer. The man picked up the towel and set it down. "I know," he said. He walked past the tables without looking at them. The door swung shut behind him, and the sound carried farther than it should have. Outside, he stood for a moment, breathing. The air felt different when it was not borrowed. He checked his phone. There was a missed call from a number he did not recognize. He did not return it. At home, he told his child he would be working somewhere else soon. He did not say where. The child nodded and asked if they would still walk to school in the mornings. Yes, he said. That night, the woman sat alone at a small table she had not chosen before. The check came and went untouched. She watched the door longer than necessary. Repair had come. It had not stayed. The new uniform was darker. It fit the same way, but the fabric was thicker, the seams more worn in. The man pulled it on before dawn and checked the pockets out of habit. Nothing unexpected. He buttoned it and stood still for a moment, listening to the apartment wake up around him. In the kitchen, the refrigerator hummed. The jar on the counter held fewer coins now. He did not open it. He packed lunch without counting slices. He poured juice without adding water. His child came in, rubbing their eyes. "You working early?" they asked. "Yes," he said. They nodded and sat at the table while he tied their shoes. He took his time with the laces, making sure they lay flat. When he stood, he did not rush to the door. Outside, the air was cool. They walked together, their steps in sync. At the corner, the child stopped and looked up. "You didn't tell them," the child said, not accusing, observing. The man considered this. The light changed. Cars passed. "They know now," he said. The child nodded once. That was enough. He watched them walk into the school building before turning away. His shoulders stayed level as he headed toward the bus stop. At the new job, the room was smaller. The tables were closer together. No one recognized him. That felt clean. He took orders, carried plates, wiped counters. When a glass tipped, he caught it before it fell. No one noticed. During a break, he sat near the back and drank water from a paper cup. He checked the time and did the math. It worked. Across town, the woman stood in the restaurant doorway one evening alone. She waited to be seated. The host did not know her name. She gave it anyway, then stopped herself. "Just one," she said. She was led to a table that was not by the window. She sat and folded her hands. When a waiter came, she thanked him and meant it. The space near the wall was empty. It stayed that way. The man finished his shift and walked home. He stopped at the store and bought what was on the list, and one thing that had been crossed out before. At the apartment, he signed the school form and placed it by the door. Later, he sat at the table while his child did homework. He sharpened a pencil when it dulled. He did not look at the clock. Nothing returned to how it had been. Something held.